You don't understand!
The alien twins begged the human officer for mercy. Lieutenant Damian Mercer pressed his back against the crumbling wall, the acrid smell of ash and ion residue burning his nostrils. 3 days tracking the fugitives through the ruins of Outpost Vega had left him exhausted, his uniform stained with the red dust of Proxima Colony. Intelligence had been clear. 2 Selenian nationals had infiltrated the outpost before its destruction, suspected of sabotage that killed 17 human peacekeepers. Central, "This is Mercer," he whispered into his comm unit. "I've tracked targets to the Eastern Medical Complex. Moving to apprehend." "Confirmed, Lieutenant," Commander Voss's voice crackled back. "Remember, these Selenians are highly dangerous. The intelligence is solid. They're military operatives disguised as civilians. We need them alive for questioning." Damian checked his pulse disruptor, setting it to stun. The Selenians, distinguishable by their silvery skin and luminescent eyes adapted to their moonlit homeworld, were physically weaker than humans, but possessed exceptional regenerative abilities. It made them formidable despite their pacifist reputation. The abandoned medical complex loomed ahead, its dome partially collapsed. Motion sensors indicated movement inside, the first confirmation of life he'd detected in this sector since the bombardment 3 weeks ago. Military protocol demanded he call for backup, but communications were spotty at best. By the time reinforcements arrived, the suspects might escape. Slipping through a fractured entranceway, Damian activated his night vision implant. The interior revealed toppled medical equipment and hastily abandoned treatment stations, a trail of luminescent footprints, a biological marker unique to Selenian physiology, led deeper into the structure. The footprints split at a junction, one set continuing straight, another veering left. A diversion tactic, Damian followed the straight path, trusting his instincts honed from 5 years of peacekeeping operations across 3 disputed territories. A soft sound, fabric rustling against metal, stopped him in his tracks. He pivoted toward a partially collapsed storage room, disruptor raised. "Colonial Peacekeeping Force, come out with your hands visible." His voice echoed through the empty corridors. After a moment's silence, a melodic voice responded, "Please." "We're unarmed." A figure emerged slowly from the shadows, hands raised. The Selenian female stood tall despite her obvious exhaustion, silver-toned skin dulled by dust and deprivation. Her luminescent eyes, large and expressive in the typical Selenian fashion, regarded him with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice carrying the musical cadence characteristic of her species. "My sister is injured. We are healers, not spies." Damian kept his weapon trained on her. "Where is your sister?" "Military intelligence has identified you both as Selenian intelligence operatives." "That's absurd," Lyra replied, a flash of anger crossing her features. "We were part of the Interstellar Medical Coalition. When the evacuation order came, we stayed behind to help the wounded, both human and Selenian." She gestured behind her, and Damian noticed a second figure partially concealed by damaged equipment. The other Selenian lay on a makeshift pallet, her breathing labored, a crude bandage wrapped around her midsection stained with the pearlescent fluid that served as Selenian blood. "This is Alara, my sister. She was injured trying to reach a human child trapped in the Eastern Quadrant during the bombardment." Damian's training warned against sympathy. Deception was a basic tactic, but something about the scene didn't align with his briefing. The medical supplies scattered around them were being used to treat wounds, not create weapons. And the second Selenian's injuries appeared genuine. "You don't understand," Lyra continued, stepping forward despite the weapon aimed at her. "Someone is lying to you. We've been transmitting emergency medical protocols, not military intelligence. Check our communication logs." She slowly reached toward a damaged console nearby, bringing up holographic records. "These are encrypted medical transmissions sent to both human and Selenian rescue teams. We've been coordinating triage efforts from this location for survivors." Damian hesitated, military discipline warring with growing doubt. His orders were explicit: apprehend the suspects and transport them to headquarters for interrogation. Yet the evidence before him contradicted everything in his briefing. "If what you're saying is true, why hasn't the medical coalition vouched for you?" he demanded, weapon still raised. "They believe we perished in the initial attack," Lyra explained, her luminescent eyes holding his gaze. "Communications were severed. We've been working independently, using remaining supplies to keep survivors alive until rescue teams could reach the outer sectors. From the makeshift bed, the injured Selenian Ilara stirred and spoke weakly. The data chip. Show him. Lyra reached slowly into a pocket of her tattered medical uniform, withdrawing a small metallic chip. This contains evidence that the attack wasn't initiated by Selenian forces as reported. We discovered it while treating a dying human commander. Damien stared at the chip, aware that his next decision would irrevocably alter his career and possibly the trajectory of the conflict. The faces of the twin healers before him bore none of the hardened markers he'd come to recognize in operatives. Instead, exhaustion and compassion etched their features. Please, Lyra whispered, the musical quality of her voice cracking with emotion. You don't understand. We're not your enemy. Damien turned the data chip over in his fingers, conflicting thoughts racing through his mind. His career, his loyalty to the colonial peacekeeping force, everything he'd built over years of service, balanced against the possibility that these Selenian twins were telling the truth. If I'm caught helping you, it's high treason, he said finally, lowering his weapon. But if what you're saying is true, it is, Lyra insisted, kneeling beside her sister to check her wound. Ilara needs proper medical attention. The infection is spreading. Damien inserted the chip into his portable terminal, watching as encrypted files cascaded across the screen. What he saw made his blood run cold: tactical communications, falsified intelligence reports, and most damning of all, orders signed by Commander Voss authorizing the bombardment of civilian sectors to provoke Selenian retaliation. This can't be right, he muttered, scrolling through document after document. Voss ordered the attack on his own people? To escalate the conflict, Lyra confirmed grimly. There are powerful interests that don't want this war to end. The mining corporations have been pushing for access to Selenian territories for decades. Ilara struggled to sit up, her silvery skin now bearing an unhealthy bluish tint. The commander in charge, the one who gave us this chip, he refused to fire on civilians. They killed him and reported it as Selenian sabotage. Damien's comm unit crackled to life. Lieutenant Mercer, report status. Have you apprehended the targets? He hesitated, looking between the twins and his comm unit. With deliberate slowness, he responded, Negative, Central. I've cleared the medical complex. Continuing search in the western quadrant. Acknowledged. Be advised, reinforcements are inbound to your location. Commander Voss wants those spies found. After the communication ended, Damien turned to the twins. We have maybe 30 minutes before they realize I've lied. Can your sister travel? With help, Lyra answered, relief visible in her luminescent eyes. There's an emergency evacuation tunnel beneath this facility, Damien explained, already gathering essential supplies. It was built during the first colonial expansion, before relations with Selenians deteriorated. It might be our only chance. Working quickly, they created a makeshift stretcher for Ilara. As Damien helped secure her, he noticed intricate markings along her arms, patterns that shifted slightly with her movements. What are these? He asked, curious despite their urgent situation. Our life patterns, Lyra explained while gathering medical supplies. They tell our history, our training, our family lineage. Ilara and I share identical base patterns because we're twins, but our life experiences create unique variations. Damien nodded, unexpectedly touched by this glimpse into their culture. For years, military briefings had reduced Selenians to tactical assessments and threat analyses. Now helping these sisters, he was confronted with the complexity he'd been trained to ignore. The evacuation tunnel was sealed behind a heavy maintenance panel. Decades of disuse had jammed the mechanisms, forcing Damien to break the locking system with his combat knife. The passage beyond was dark and narrow, thick with dust and the musty smell of abandonment. It should lead to an old terraforming station about 3 kilometers from here, he explained, activating a light on his tactical vest. From there, we can find transport to the neutral zone at the northern border. They moved as quickly as Ilara's condition allowed, Damien taking the brunt of her weight while Lyra supported her sister's head and shoulders. The tunnel gradually sloped downward, the air growing cooler and damper. Why are you helping us? Lyra asked as they paused to rest, her voice echoing softly against the stone walls. You're risking everything. Damien checked Ilara's pulse, weaker but stable, before answering. I joined the peacekeepers because I believed in protecting the innocent. If what your data chip shows is true, then I've been serving the wrong cause." A distant rumble interrupted them, the unmistakable sound of explosives detonating above. "They're searching the complex," Damien said grimly. "Voss isn't taking chances." They quickened their pace, the tunnel growing narrower as it wound beneath the colony's infrastructure. Alara drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring in the melodic Selenian language. Lyra responded softly, her voice carrying a soothing quality that transcended the language barrier. After what felt like hours, they emerged into the abandoned terraforming station. The facility stood isolated among rocky outcroppings, its equipment long dormant, viewports crusted with the red dust of Proxima Colony. Damien secured the area while Lyra tended to her sister. Using the station's old communication array, he managed to intercept Colonial Force transmissions. The news was worse than he'd anticipated. Voss had declared them all traitors, claiming Damien had been compromised by Selenian mind control, a fictional ability that played on common human fears. "We need to move quickly," he announced, returning to where Lyra was changing Alara's bandages. "Voss has deployed hunter-seekers. They'll detect Selenian biosignatures. There's something else you should know," Lyra said, her expression grave. "The wound. It's not just from debris, as we told you. Alara was shot by a human officer when she tried to stop him from executing wounded Selenian civilians." Damien felt a cold anger settling in his chest. "Was it Voss?" "No," Lyra shook her head. "Someone under his command. A man called Draven." The name hit Damien like a physical blow. Major Kylan Draven, Voss's second-in-command and Damien's former mentor. A decorated veteran with an impeccable service record. "Are you certain?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The pieces were falling into place. Draven's increased agitation, his vehement anti-Selenian rhetoric, his unexplained absences. "I'll never forget his face," Lyra said quietly. "He would have killed me too if the building hadn't collapsed." Outside, the wind had picked up, swirling red dust across the barren landscape. Night would fall soon, providing some cover for their journey. But first they needed transportation. In the station's maintenance bay, Damien discovered an old terrain vehicle, outdated but serviceable. As he worked to restore power to the engine, he felt Lyra's presence beside him. "Your people have a saying," she said, handing him tools as needed. "The first casualty of war is truth. On Selene, we say, when hearts grow silent, voices become weapons." Damien paused, looking up at her. In the fading light, her silvery skin seemed to absorb the sunset's colors, creating subtle iridescent patterns. For the first time, he saw beauty where he'd been trained to see alienness. "If we survive this," he said, "I want to learn more about your people, the truth, not what I've been taught." Lyra's expression softened. "And I would learn about yours." As darkness fell across the colony, they loaded Ilara into the vehicle and set out across the rugged terrain. An unlikely alliance formed in the shadow of a war built on lies. The terrain vehicle rumbled across the fractured landscape, its suspension groaning under the strain of crater-pocked roads. 3 days had passed since their escape from the medical complex, and Voss's forces had established checkpoints throughout the region. They traveled mainly at night, hiding during daylight hours in abandoned structures or natural formations that dotted Proxima Colony's wilderness. Alara's condition had stabilized, but remained precarious. The infection in her wound had responded to antibiotics scavenged from emergency caches, but she needed proper medical facilities, something they wouldn't find until they reached the neutral settlement of Haven's Crossing. "How much farther?" Lyra asked, cradling her sister's head in her lap as Damien navigated through a dried riverbed. "Another day, maybe 2 if we keep having to detour around patrols," he replied, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. He'd disabled his locator chip and abandoned most of his military equipment, but hunter-seekers were programmed to recognize his biometric signature alongside Selenian physiology. The vehicle's communications unit crackled with intercepted military chatter. Damien had modified it to monitor Colonial Force frequencies, providing warning of approaching patrols. "Repeat, all units maintain alert status for Lieutenant Mercer and Selenian fugitives. Commander Voss has authorized lethal force, suspected heading toward Northern Territories." Damien switched off the comm, jaw tightening. We need to change course. They're concentrating forces along our expected route. There's an alternative, Lyra suggested hesitantly. Through the shattered plains. Damien glanced sharply at her. That's Krell territory. The tribal agreements specifically prohibit colonial or Selenian presence there. The Krell were Proxima's indigenous species, reptilian humanoids who had maintained fierce independence despite colonial expansion. Unlike the diplomatic Selenians, the Krell had resisted integration through aggressive territorial defense. The Krell have no quarrel with healers, Lyra explained. Before the war escalated, Elara and I worked with their shamans, exchanging medical knowledge. They might grant us passage. Damien considered their options. The direct route to Haven's Crossing was now too heavily patrolled. The alternative, a wide detour through uninhabited mountains, would take too long given Elara's condition. It's a gamble, he said finally, adjusting their course, but one worth taking. They reached the borders of the shattered plains by nightfall, a vast expanse of twisted rock formations created by tectonic activity during early terraforming attempts. Bioluminescent vegetation cast an eerie blue glow across the landscape, illuminating paths between towering stone pillars. We should continue on foot, Lyra suggested. The vehicle will attract attention. Damien concurred, concealing the terrain vehicle beneath a rocky overhang. They fashioned a more comfortable stretcher for Elara, who drifted in and out of consciousness but managed a weak smile when informed of their plan. Noktar will remember us, she whispered, naming the Krell shaman they had worked with. As they ventured deeper into Krell territory, Damien remained vigilant, his military training cataloging potential threats and escape routes. Yet he found himself increasingly distracted by Lyra, her unwavering dedication to her sister, her resilience in the face of exhaustion, the graceful efficiency of her movements. You're staring, Lieutenant, she noted as they rested beside a glowing pool of water. Damien looked away, embarrassed. Sorry, I've never spent this much time with a Selenian before. You're different than what they taught us. Different how? She asked, genuinely curious. More human, I suppose, he admitted, immediately regretting his choice of words. I don't mean that the way it sounds. To his surprise, Lyra laughed. A melodic sound that seemed to harmonize with the strange sounds of the plains. And you're more Selenian than I expected. Compassionate beneath that military exterior. Their conversation was interrupted by movement in the shadows, the unmistakable silhouettes of Krell warriors, their scaled bodies adorned with tribal markings, elongated heads crowned with bony crests. Do not move, Damien whispered, reaching instinctively for a weapon he no longer carried. Lyra placed a restraining hand on his arm. Let me speak to them. She stood slowly, hands raised in the traditional Krell greeting, and spoke in their sibilant language. Damien watched in amazement as she conversed with the lead warrior, her musical voice adapting perfectly to the harsh consonants of Krell speech. After several tense minutes, the warriors lowered their weapons. They will take us to Noktar, Lyra explained, relief evident in her voice. But we must be blindfolded for part of the journey. They will not reveal the location of their sacred healing grounds to outsiders. Damien hesitated, military training rebelling against the idea of surrendering his vision in potentially hostile territory. Trust works both ways. Lieutenant, Lyra said softly, correctly reading his concern. With a nod, he accepted the blindfold offered by one of the warriors. They traveled for hours, guided by Krell hands, the terrain changing beneath their feet from rocky to soft sand, then to smooth stone. When the blindfolds were removed, they stood in a vast underground cavern illuminated by the same bioluminescent vegetation that dotted the plains above. Noktar, the Krell shaman, was ancient even by his species' standards. His scales had faded from vibrant green to pale jade, and his crest had calcified into an impressive crown-like structure. He examined Elara with surprising gentleness, clicking and hissing in his native tongue. He says the poison is deep, Lyra translated, her expression darkening. Poison? Noktar produced a small vial containing a familiar metallic substance. Neurotoxin, Damien identified immediately, cold realization dawning. It's military grade, used in specialized ammunition for high-value targets. Lyra's luminescent eyes widened with horror. They never intended to capture us for questioning. The order was elimination from the start. While Noctar and his apprentices worked to treat Alara, Damien and Lyra were provided food and shelter in a small adjoining cavern. The Krell diet, consisting primarily of subterranean fungi and cave fish, was bland but nourishing. "Why would Voss want you eliminated rather than captured?" Damien asked as they ate. "If you were truly spies, you'd be more valuable alive for interrogation." "Because we know too much," Lyra replied, setting aside her half-eaten meal. "Not just about the false flag operation, but about previous incidents. Alara and I were part of an investigation into mysterious illnesses affecting Selenian communities near human mining operations." She pulled out the data chip they'd brought from the medical complex. "There's more on here than just the attack orders. There's evidence of deliberate contamination, biological agents introduced into water supplies." Damien felt sick. Chemical warfare is prohibited under the Colonial Charter, as is targeting medical personnel, Lyra added bitterly. Yet here we are. That night, unable to sleep, Damien found himself standing at the entrance to the healing chamber, watching Lyra assist the Krell healers. Her silver hands moved with practiced precision, applying poultices and adjusting equipment. There was a fluid grace to her work, a dance of healing that transcended species boundaries. When she finally emerged, exhaustion evident in her slumped shoulders, he stepped forward to support her. "How is she?" he asked softly. "Stabilized," Lyra replied, unconsciously leaning against him. "Noctar believes she'll recover enough to travel by morning." They stood in comfortable silence, the strange beauty of the underground sanctuary surrounding them. Without thinking, Damien reached out to brush a strand of her silvery hair from her face. Lyra stilled at his touch, her luminescent eyes meeting his. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, withdrawing his hand. "I shouldn't have—" "It's all right," she interrupted, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. In Selenian culture, touch is significant, but not unwelcome. Something shifted between them in that moment. A boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged. Damien felt his heartbeat quicken as Lyra hesitantly reached up to trace the scar that ran along his jaw. "You've been injured many times," she observed, her cool fingers leaving tingling sensations in their wake. "Hazards of peacekeeping," he attempted humor, though his voice came out rougher than intended. "Is that what you call it?" she asked without accusation, merely curiosity. "It's what I believed it was," he answered honestly. "Now I'm not sure what to call anything anymore." Lyra's hand came to rest against his cheek. "On Selene we have a word, Tahalmira. It means the moment between unlearning and relearning. That's where you are now." "Where we both are," Damien corrected gently, covering her hand with his own. Their moment of connection was interrupted by urgent clicking from the healing chamber. Noctar emerged, gesturing frantically and speaking in rapid Krell. "What's he saying?" Damien asked, instantly alert. Lyra's expression shifted to alarm. "Colonial forces have entered the shattered plains. They have detection equipment. They're tracking us somehow." Damien's mind raced. He'd disabled his locator, abandoned his equipment. Unless... He quickly searched his remaining gear, fingers finding a small object embedded in the lining of his tactical vest. Tracking beacon. They must have planted it before I even left headquarters. As they hurriedly prepared to depart, gathering Alara and essential supplies, Damien faced an uncomfortable truth. Their escape had never been chance. Someone had anticipated his defection, had perhaps even counted on it. The question now was why and whether they were being hunted or herded. Dawn broke over Haven's Crossing, painting the neutral settlement in hues of amber and gold. Unlike the military precision of colonial outposts or the organic architecture of Selenian enclaves, Haven had evolved organically, a patchwork of cultures and building styles representing the diverse refugees who had found sanctuary here. Damien guided their newly acquired hover transport through the settlement's outskirts, vigilant for any sign of colonial or Selenian military presence. The Krell had provided them safe passage to the edge of their territory, along with the vehicle, a parting gift negotiated by Lyra in exchange for a promise to return with medical supplies. "Will they be watching for us here?" Lyra asked, her silvery features partially concealed beneath a hooded cloak. In the rear compartment, Alara rested more comfortably. Her condition improved enough for her to remain conscious for longer periods. Definitely, Damien confirmed, eyes scanning the crowds. But Haven operates under the Protection Accord. Neither colonial nor Selenian forces can enter without permission from the Council of Neutrals. Laws haven't stopped Voss so far, Ilara remarked weakly, speaking more than she had in days. True, but Haven has defensive capabilities that make direct assault costly, Damien explained. And more importantly, they have their own intelligence network. We need to find someone called the Arbiter. The hover transport glided through increasingly crowded streets, passing markets where humans traded with Selenians, Krell and other species Damien couldn't identify. Despite the war raging beyond its borders, Haven maintained a fragile harmony, proof that coexistence was possible when given the chance. They stopped near a medical facility distinguished by a universal healing symbol that incorporated elements from multiple species' medical traditions. As Damien helped transfer Ilara to a hover stretcher, a tall figure approached, human in appearance but with modifications that suggested off-world origins. "You look lost, soldier," the stranger observed, cybernetic eyes whirring as they focused on Damien's face. "And in dangerous company." "We need to see the Arbiter," Damien replied, hand instinctively moving toward a weapon he no longer carried. "We have information." "Information is Haven's primary currency," the stranger interrupted, gesturing for them to follow. "And the Arbiter deals exclusively in premium exchanges." They were led through the medical facility and down a secured elevator that descended deep beneath the settlement. The corridor below opened into a vast command center staffed by representatives of various species, all monitoring communications and security feeds. At the center stood a woman whose species was not immediately identifiable, her features combining elements of human and Selenian physiology, with the scale patterns of Krell visible along her temples. "The Arbiter, I presume," Damien said, stepping forward. "Correct, Lieutenant Mercer," she replied, her voice carrying harmonics impossible for a human vocal structure. "Though I believe former lieutenant would be more accurate now." "You know who we are," Lyra observed, supporting her sister. "I make it my business to know everyone who enters Haven with a colonial tracking beacon." The Arbiter gestured toward a nearby medical team. "Your sister needs attention. My staff will care for her while we talk." After ensuring Ilara would receive proper treatment, Damien and Lyra followed the Arbiter to a private chamber where holographic displays showed real-time updates of military movements throughout the sector. "Colonial forces have established a perimeter around Haven," the Arbiter explained, highlighting red markers surrounding the settlement. "They're claiming jurisdiction to pursue terrorists responsible for attacks on human outposts." "That's a lie," Damien countered, producing the data chip. "We have evidence that Commander Voss orchestrated those attacks himself to escalate the conflict. The Selenians are being framed." The Arbiter accepted the chip, inserting it into a secure terminal. As the data unfolded across multiple displays, her expression remained impassive, though subtle changes in the scale patterns along her temples suggested strong emotion. "This is comprehensive," she finally acknowledged, "but it's also precisely what I expected." "You knew?" Lyra asked incredulously. "I suspected," the Arbiter clarified. "Haven exists because there are always those who profit from conflict, and those who resist them. For months, we've tracked unusual movement of weapons and bioagents through shell corporations linked to Proxima Mining Consortium. The same consortium that's been pushing for access to Selenian territories." Damien realized the final pieces falling into place. "Precisely." The Arbiter brought up new displays showing financial transactions and corporate structures. "Voss is merely a tool, well compensated but ultimately disposable. The real architects are the consortium's directors, who stand to gain trillions in mineral rights once Selenian sovereignty is undermined." "How do we stop them?" Lyra asked, the determination in her voice matched by the intensity in her luminescent eyes. "We already have," the Arbiter replied with the first hint of a smile. "The moment you entered Haven with that tracking beacon, you completed a trap 3 years in the making." She expanded a tactical display, showing colonial forces surrounding Haven, and beyond them, a secondary perimeter of Selenian vessels that had remained cloaked until now. "Both governments have representatives here, monitoring this conversation. Your evidence, combined with our own, has forced an unprecedented joint operation. As we speak, Arrest warrants are being executed for Voss, Draven, and 12 consortium executives. Damien felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief that justice would be served, vindication for his choice to help the twins, and uncertainty about what came next. "What happens to us?" he asked quietly. "That," the Arbiter said, "is somewhat more complicated." Over the next week, Haven became the center of diplomatic activity, as both colonial and Selenian authorities established temporary headquarters within the neutral zone. Ilara's condition improved rapidly under proper medical care, her natural regenerative abilities finally able to overcome the toxin that had suppressed them. Damien found himself in an unusual position, neither hero nor traitor, but something undefined. He had been debriefed multiple times by colonial investigators, his testimony corroborating the evidence from the data chip and the Arbiter's intelligence network. He saw little of Lyra during this time, as she and Ilara were sequestered with Selenian representatives. The separation left an unexpected emptiness, a longing that surprised him with its intensity. On the 8th evening, as he stood on an observation deck watching distant ships moving through Proxima's orbit, he sensed a presence beside him. "I was beginning to think they'd shipped you back to Selene," he said without turning, recognizing Lyra's distinctive scent, something like starflowers and ozone. "They tried," she replied, moving to stand beside him. "Ilara and I refused." Now he did turn, taking in her appearance. She wore traditional Selenian attire, flowing silver fabric that complemented her natural coloring. The effect was striking. "You look," he searched for the right word, "peaceful." She smiled, the expression transforming her features. "For the first time in months, I am." The evidence was irrefutable. A joint tribunal has been formed to prosecute those responsible, and preliminary peace talks have begun. "And us?" Damien asked, the question encompassing more than just their legal status. Lyra's luminescent eyes studied him with an intensity that made his heart race. "The Arbiter has offered us positions with Haven's peacekeeping force. All three of us. Working together?" The possibility hadn't occurred to him. "If that's what you want," she replied, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Damien reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if his touch was unwelcome. When she remained still, he gently traced the pattern on her forearm, the life markings she had explained in the evacuation tunnel. "On Selene," she said softly, "this gesture has significant meaning." "I know," he replied, meeting her gaze. "Ilara explained it to me yesterday. She said it's how Selenians express interest." Lyra's skin flushed with a subtle iridescence. "My sister has always been too forthright." "I find that quality runs in the family," Damien said with a smile, continuing to trace the pattern. "Is she wrong?" Instead of answering directly, Lyra stepped closer, one hand rising to touch the scar along his jaw as she had in the Krell cavern. "There is no precedent for this. A human and a Selenian." "There's a first time for everything," he murmured, closing the distance between them. Their kiss was tentative at first, an exploration of differences and similarities. Her lips were cooler than a human's, but soft and yielding. The sensation sent electricity through his nervous system, a connection transcending physiology. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Lyra's eyes had taken on a brighter luminescence. "That was," she began. "The beginning," Damien finished for her, drawing her closer as the stars of their shared galaxy wheeled overhead, witnesses to a new kind of alliance. 6 months later, the observation platform of Haven's central tower offered an unparalleled view of history unfolding. Representatives from colonial administration, the Selenian conclave, and even a delegation of Krell elders had gathered for the signing of the Proxima Accords, a comprehensive peace treaty and reparations agreement that would reshape interstellar relations. Damien adjusted the formal uniform of Haven's peacekeeping force, the neutral gray and blue a welcome change from colonial military attire. As Haven's newly appointed security director, his presence at the ceremony was required, though he would have preferred to observe from a distance. "Nervous?" Ilara asked, approaching with a datapad in hand. Her recovery had been complete, her natural Selenian regeneration eventually overcoming the toxin's effects. She now served as Haven's chief medical officer, her expertise valued across species barriers. "Cautious," Damien corrected. Peace is fragile, especially when built on the ashes of conspiracy and deception. Yet necessary, she countered, handing him the datapad. The final security protocols for the ceremony. Lyra approved them but wanted your assessment as well. He scanned the document, noting Lyra's meticulous planning. As Haven's diplomatic liaison, she had worked tirelessly to coordinate security between traditionally adversarial forces. Her natural empathy, combined with newfound diplomatic skills, had proven invaluable during negotiations. "Where is she?" he asked, returning the datapad with an approving nod. "Mediating a last-minute disagreement between the colonial trade minister and the Selenian resource conservator," Ilara replied with an amused expression. Apparently, mineral rights remained contentious even in peacetime. The trial of Commander Voss and the consortium executives had concluded 2 months earlier, with unanimous guilty verdicts. Evidence from the data chip, combined with the Arbiter's extensive intelligence network, had exposed a conspiracy spanning 5 years and involving officials from both human and Selenian governments. The revelation had initially threatened to deepen hostilities, but under the guidance of more moderate leaders, had instead catalyzed genuine peace efforts. Sometimes, the Arbiter had observed during the trials, systems must be broken before they can be properly rebuilt. The ceremony proceeded with solemn dignity, speeches acknowledging past wrongs, commitments to future cooperation, and the formal signing of documents that would establish a joint governance system for disputed territories. Damien maintained vigilance throughout, though intelligence suggested no credible threats existed. When it concluded, dignitaries dispersed to various reception areas, leaving the observation platform momentarily empty save for Damien and the approaching figure of Lyra. Her diplomatic attire, a fusion of Selenian tradition and colonial formal style, symbolized her unique position between worlds. "Congratulations, Liaison Lyra," he said formally, though his eyes conveyed more intimate sentiments. "The accords are signed and Haven remains secure." "We make a good team, Director Mercer," she replied with equal formality, though a smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Though I suspect our work has only begun." He glanced around to ensure their privacy before taking her hand, fingers interlacing with practiced familiarity. Over months, they had learned each other's physiological differences, her cooler body temperature, his quicker heartbeat, and found harmony in those contrasts. "I received a communication from Earth today," he said, leading her to a quiet corner overlooking the settlement. "The Colonial High Commission wants to establish a permanent embassy here. They've requested I consider the position of ambassador." Lyra's luminescent eyes widened. "That's a significant promotion. Would you accept?" "It would mean staying in Haven permanently," Damien replied, studying her reaction carefully. "Establishing roots." "Roots," she repeated thoughtfully, her free hand unconsciously touching the life patterns on her forearm. During their months together, new patterns had begun to form, a biological response to significant life changes that Selenian physiology manifested visibly. "I've been thinking about roots as well," she continued. "The Selenian Conclave has approved my request to establish a medical research facility here, focusing on cross-species treatments. Ilara would oversee operations while I maintain diplomatic duties." Hope blossomed in Damien's chest. "So you're staying too?" "If there's sufficient reason," she answered with deliberate ambiguity, though her eyes conveyed clear meaning. Damien reached into his uniform pocket, withdrawing a small object wrapped in iridescent cloth, a traditional Selenian gesture of intention that Ilara had helped him prepare. "I believe I can provide one," he said, unfolding the cloth to reveal a pendant crafted from rare metals found on both Selene and Earth, its design incorporating elements of both cultures. "On Earth, we have a tradition of offering tokens to those we wish to build a life with." Lyra's breath caught as she recognized the significance. "Damien, I know there's no precedent," he said, echoing her words from months ago. "A human and a Selenian formally bonded. But if these peace accords have taught us anything, it's that unprecedented doesn't mean impossible." Tears gathered in her luminescent eyes, catching light like liquid diamonds. "There will be resistance from both our peoples." "Let there be," he replied with the confidence that had first drawn her to him. "We faced worse odds." She took the pendant, examining its craftsmanship before placing it around her neck. The metal seemed to bond with her silvery skin, taking on a subtle glow. In Selenian tradition, she explained, the acceptance of such a token is only the beginning. There are ceremonies, family approval. Damien smiled. I've already spoken with Alara. She's been surprisingly supportive. Only because she wagered with the Arbiter that you would propose before year's end, Lyra laughed. The musical sound carrying across the platform. Apparently I was the only one who didn't see this coming. Below them, Haven continued its daily rhythms. Markets bustling with interspecies trade. Medical facilities treating patients of all origins. Children from different worlds playing in communal gardens. A microcosm of what could be possible on a larger scale given time and commitment. 6 months ago I was hunting you through ruins, Damien marveled, drawing her close. Now I'm proposing a future neither of us could have imagined.